corruption and political interference in the justice system. The committee's evidence leader, Advocate Norman Arendse, is leading his evidence-in-chief. Mchunu is accused of giving a directive to disband the PKTT.
That's how I thought about it, and that's how far I went in thinking about what I'd been thrust into.
As the world commemorates World Food Day, a non-governmental organization in South Africa, Union Against Hunger, was picketing at the division of the $1 million retail giant Shoprite in Centurion in the Gauteng province of South Africa. The NGO, supported by other organizations, demanded, amongst others, that the retailer lowers their food prices for the sake of the survival of the poor. National organizer of the organization, Esther Padi, explains.
So that is one of the demands of the Union Against Hunger, that we are asking for shop prices to be dropped because food is very expensive and it's unnecessary. This country, we don't have a problem in terms of food supply. We just have greedy retailers who are making millions. 20 million a day for profit at ShopRite is very unfair in a space where you are living with communities with a very high rate of unemployment. So our call is to say let the prices drop, and we're not saying drop everything, we're just asking for 10 essential foods for people to afford to buy maize meal, to afford to buy milk and eggs, because those are nutritional food.
Lastly, U.S. officials have downplayed claims that Hamas is violating the ceasefire deal with Israel by not returning all the bodies of dead hostages. Forensic tests have established the 2 bodies out of 3 handed over to Israel on Wednesday were hostages, while 19 others remain unaccounted for. The BBC's Yolanda Nell.
We had President Trump saying how difficult it was for some of these bodies to be accessed, that they were under rubble, that they were in underground tunnels, he said. And then there was a briefing given by 2 senior advisors from the Trump administration where they said that they were looking with other mediators at different ways to locate the remaining bodies, that they were acting in good faith. And they said that it was possible now a Turkish team of 80 strong experts who have recovered bodies previously after earthquakes, that they could go into Gaza to assist with this effort.
Recapping on your top stories, the former Congolese President Joseph Kabila has announced a movement to save his country after a meeting with other opposition leaders in Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Bafana Stars as well as the technical team will be awarded for qualifying for the FIFA World Cup next year, while soccer's governing body FIFA has opened media rights tender covering the next Men's World Cup. Details coming up at 4:30.
It is a very good afternoon to you, Zambia. Good afternoon, Malawi, Namibia. Good afternoon to you, Eritrea, Somalia, Senegal. Good afternoon to Africa in Business on Channel Africa. I'm Thami Ngubeni. This is where you get the African perspective. It's where we meet to look at the latest in news, sport and business. Coming up on this Thursday afternoon, as we bring you every single Thursday, our weekly G20 feature. Our focus this afternoon, the G20 Woman. We host that in collaboration with the National Pulse and Ashraf Garda on SAFM. And also in our C-suite, we host Nomfundo Mkoyi, founder and CEO of Iqebo Letu Group. It's 7 minutes after 4 p.m. A very warm welcome to you.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
We begin here this afternoon with a look at Zambia's economy. The country has reached bilateral debt restructuring agreements with some of its Chinese creditors, including the Export-Import Bank of China. Finance Minister Situmbeko Musokotwane says the deals represent a major milestone in the country's long and complex journey to reorganize its debt, a process that began after Zambia became Africa's first sovereign defaulter in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. Channel Africa's economics reporter Innocent Simosa has more.
The Southern African nation owes more than $4 billion to China Exim, its single biggest creditor. Economist Trevor Hambai shares the significance of this latest agreement with Chinese lenders in easing Zambia's overall debt burden.
So it must be realized that Zambia is currently in the process of having to be able to undertake a debt restructuring. That debt restructuring has basically had three components, which is the official creditors, the bondholders, and the private creditors. This last component of the debt restructuring is where the private creditors are. And the last one that they're having to be able to sign the agreements now is with the private creditors. It was one of the most difficult ones to be able to restructure because the creditors are private. And this is significant in Zambia actually completing its debt restructuring as an initial stage. Having done the debt restructuring is that this is what is going to create the fiscal space for the country, bring its debt to sustainable levels, and of course, then open up the window for private investors.
Hambai says the debt restructuring would provide Zambia with fiscal relief, enabling the government to prioritize investment in infrastructure, healthcare, education, and other critical sectors.
Firstly, is that the restructuring for the country is that it gets the country out of the selected default rating that it had on the international market. The rating now has moved to relatively triple C minus, and this is positive in getting to a point where that credit rating creates international confidence.
But what lessons can other African countries facing debt challenges draw from Zambia's approach to managing its obligation?
And the lessons that we can all learn from the African continent, firstly, is that we need to be able to manage our debt situation a lot better. This cyclical challenge where countries fall back into debt and then they're asking for forgiveness is an issue of poor fiscal management, and this must be addressed. But secondly, in terms of the debt restructuring that Zambia has undergone, firstly, is that the process has taken more than 4 years to be able to complete. And this is a very difficult issue in terms of having to be able to resolve country's debt situation. I think maybe there are lessons to be learned there around the IMF common framework that they're using to be able to undertake the debt restructuring.
For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samos in Johannesburg.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
It has gone exactly 11 minutes after 4 p.m. as we turn our focus on World Food Day and the increase in food prices. As the world commemorates World Food Day, a non-governmental organization in South Africa called Union Against Hunger, which is supported by numerous organizations, they picketed at the division of the billion US dollar retail giant ShopRite in Centurion. This is in the Gauteng province of South Africa. The NGO demanded, amongst others, that the retail lower their food prices for the sake of the survival of the poor. Sese Sekhalo attended the picketing and has more on this story.
Scores of people gathered and picketed outside one of the divisions of retail giant ShopRite in Centurion in the Gauteng province of South Africa. The Union Against Hunger, supported by other organizations, says they are tired of the situation in South Africa where the majority of people suffer from hunger. They say their mission is to ensure that the constitutional right of citizens to have food is kept. National organizer Esther Padi emphasized that sometimes people think it is their fault that they cannot afford 3 meals a day, while retailers pocket millions.
So that is one of the demands of the Union Against Hunger, that we are asking for shop prices to be dropped because food is very expensive and it's unnecessary. This country, we don't have a problem in terms of food supply. We just have greedy retailers who are making millions. 20 million a day for profit at ShopRite is very unfair in a space where you are living with communities with a very high rate of unemployment. So our call is to say let the prices drop, and we're not saying drop everything, we're just asking for 10 essential foods for people to afford to buy maize meal, to afford to buy milk and eggs, because those are nutritional food. And we're not just asking for food prices to be dropped, but we are also lobbying and mobilizing around the issue of nutritious food, because we have 11,000 children every year who die because of malnutrition.
The General Industries Workers Union of South Africa, GIUSA, was one of those who supported the picket. They highlighted that hunger affects millions who are unemployed, but hits even harder to those that are employed. President of the union, Mametlo Sibei, expressed that many of the workers are on minimum wage or below and simply cannot afford the cost of living, let alone food.
Many workers are literally going to sleep without 3 meals. Many of them, if they're lucky, 1, 2 meals at most, but they can't afford 3 meals, right? And I think the cost of grocery driven upward into astronomical, unaffordable levels by retail monopolies like, ShopRite and others, who are paying their CEOs staggering tens of millions of rents, in salaries, and of course all sorts of benefits, are the ones that are driving the cost of food beyond this level of unaffordability, at the same time as our people are hungry. And we're here to protest that. We're here to say that is absolutely unacceptable, unsustainable, and we can't allow it to go on unchallenged.
Meanwhile, the retailer ShopRite sent a representative from the company to come and accept the memorandum from the organizations. For Channel Africa, I'm Sisi Sekhalo in Pretoria, South Africa.
Africa in Business. Africa in Business delivers key insights and real-time updates on Africa's growing markets with Thami Ngubeni. The African Perspective on Channel Africa.
Channel Africa.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa and SAFM, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
It is exactly 16 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. It is a Thursday afternoon, and you know exactly what that means. Come this hour and time on this day, Ashraf Garda of the National Pulse on SAFM and myself, Thami Ngubeni, host of Africa in Business on Channel Africa, hold hands, a team together to make sure that all of Africa knows exactly what is going on as far as the G20 is concerned. We do know that it is monumental for the continent. For the first time, the G20 going to be held on African soil, South Africa being the host come November. Now, the Women 20 South Africa Summit did take place earlier this week, and they were very specific about urging G20 leaders to prioritize policies that are promoting entrepreneurship, financial inclusion, as well as access to education and healthcare for both women and children around the world. And Ashraf, I'm sure you'll agree with me that this is a struggle that continues to intensify, and a struggle that still continues the voices of men, women, and advocates around the globe.
Absolutely. Good to connect with you as always, Thami. Yes, I think there's this huge drive for, economic advancement, well, for all people in the world, but specifically for women. And the Women 20 Engagement Group, in this case, is Advanced Gender Equality and Women's Economic Empowerment. In this case, offering this platform for diverse women to advocate for relevant policies and programs. The question is how?
The question is how, and we've got just the person to unpack this for us this afternoon. We're joined by one of the speakers at the summit, the founder and CEO of Creative Development, Dr. Okito Wedu. A very good afternoon to you, Doctor. Welcome.
Afternoon. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, good to connect with you as well, Dr. Rakido. So let me start with this first up, right? Maybe it's been asked 50 times, but we have to ask it again. What for you would be the biggest challenge, or the biggest challenges in this case, in plural form, faced by women as a result of not having, gender-focused policies? Because you find often enough there's an absence of being very intentional about gender empowerment.
Absolutely, and thank you for starting us off on a really pertinent question, which I love to answer, by the way. I think policies, essentially, that don't account for gender are inadvertently built to fail because inequality is built into the design, right? So women still carry most unpaid work, they earn less, and they often work in the informal sector, informal jobs, without the protection and benefits that, they require. So this often means less income, less safety, less time to actually grow and sustain a business or any kind of career for that fact. So when you design a policy that assumes that everyone is essentially starting on the same level, what you will find is that women often fall through the cracks of that. So the challenge here really isn't about capability. The challenge here is access. And to fix this, we need to design economies that actually serve the people who move and run those economies forward. And women are a staple to that. So this is essentially what you find when gender is not a factor or a leading factor in terms of how policy is negotiated, designed, and implemented.
Dr. Ngubeni, as you mentioned this, it just comes to mind that this is a mammoth task that you are embarking on. It's literally taking the triangle or the pyramid and turning it upside down, because you're talking about a reworking of the genesis and the skeleton of these policies. But to be more specific, what are the type of policy measures that you are proposing for the G20 governments to put in place in order to support those women that you talk about, those women in the informal sector? I'm talking about women entrepreneurs, and especially women who are living in lower income countries.
So I would propose three things to start with, right? Essentially, and hopefully I can go through this in the most simple way as possible. One, make it easier to trade, right? So let's cut the red tape, simplify registrations and tax for micro and small firms, make public procurement work for women enterprises. The second thing I would propose is really open up finance, right? So lower collateral requirements needed for particularly people within informal economies to start businesses, right? Guarantee small loans, support digital payments so that women could actually operate safely and independently. And the third thing that I would propose or recommend is make it possible for women to actually work, right? And it sounds almost ridiculous, but it's important when you think about the investments needed around childcare, paid caregiving leave, safe mobility so that women could actually trade and scale. So if you think about, the G20 backing the Johannesburg goals, which is essentially the 35% shift in jobs, pay, and care by 2035, this should be more than just verbiage, right? We actually need the funding and the appropriate and adequate funding to support the goal so that women entrepreneurs are essentially able to grow and have the kind of time and capital needed to actualize in the way that they want to, that they desperately need to as entrepreneurs in a particular context and space such as this. So those would be my immediate recommendations around this issue.
All right, let's talk about the care economy, and maybe you can explain what that is. But there's a sense that came out of the summit is that this care economy is neglected. So, A, do you agree with that? And if so, how do we turn that from neglect to genuine benefit?
So the care economy is definitely neglected. It's ironic because care work is essentially the foundation of every economy. So if you think about teachers, nurses, domestic workers, housewives, right? If they were to stop for a single day everything else would stop with them. So the problem here is that we still treat care or care work and care sectors as if it's charity, volunteering work, as opposed to labor that drives productivity, right? So this is essentially what needs to change. And creative development, our belief is culture comes first, policy and systems follow. So we need to essentially start telling stories and better narratives to make the critical nature of care work much more visible to the public and key stakeholders at large. And then the policies and the kind of investments that need to support the policies must follow. And so this would be budgets for childcare. We're thinking about fair wages. We're thinking about protection for domestic workers. And then after that, we need to track these things. So we need to be able to track care in the same way that we're able to track energy and infrastructure and transport. So when governments are able to fund care work, when businesses are able to operationalize and think about care within their operation system, so proper time off, care leave, etc. And when society begins to see care and care workers as skilled labor, we will get to a point where we're not just talking about women being recognized, but we can move the conversation onto women being paid and paid adequately for the work that they do within society. And this is where economies will grow and will grow much more fairer, much more resilient.
I mean, as you mentioned all of that, Doctor, I'm just thinking, when you look at care work, it benefits not only the women, it benefits the men, the children, and indeed the entire community and society. So in as much as this may be advocated by the W20, it is an all of society approach that will actually benefit from this. But post the G20 presidency of South Africa, how do you hope the propositions that you've put in place, as well as all the various interventions, will continue to evolve and remain relevant and effective?
Thank you for that question. I think as the G20 presidency moves from South Africa to the USA, I think the task for all of us is to ensure that the agenda set, the agenda that we've built here, doesn't lose momentum or meaning, right? And so what this fundamentally means is that the Johannesburg goals needs to be incorporated within the economic track and not just the gender track, right? Which would fundamentally mean that there's annual reporting around these jobs, around pay, around care work, around safety, and that this is incorporated as part of the G20 finance and labor work streams, right? As opposed to just the gender track. It would mean aligning on development finance, where we're thinking about institutions such as like the African Development Bank or the World Bank, and the sort of prioritized investment that needs to be made around care infrastructure, women enterprises, as well as safety systems. This would be critical. And again, not just having this seen as the kind of side project that people need to do to be able to meet the KPIs at the end of the year and get the money out, right? And then finally, incorporating culture into the mix the entire time. So storytelling, public dialogues, ensuring that not just youth, but men are brought into the conversation as well, and not just with the framework or the perceptions in which we've engaged men in anything gender related in the past, right? So I think this is how you keep the W20 alive beyond a single presidency, by essentially turning the goals into a public mandate, right? So that it's not just limited to a moment.
Yeah, Thami, you want to say more?
No, I'm just, wanting to exclaim the fact that indeed getting the women's issues and women's economy out of women's issues and into mainstream economic issues is so important because of the impact that women's contribution makes to global GDPs. And if those gaps are closed, how much more of an impact women would then be able to make.
And I'm hoping people will respond to that as well. I'll tell you what, Thami, we can talk about it all afternoon. I know that. I much appreciate your time. However, Dr. Okito Wedi, who's the CEO of Creative Development, and I think those points are important about public participation, and that last point about actually men has to be central to the issue, the issue around women empowerment and that the agency that they may have around just that. So thank you for your time, Dr. Wedi. Much appreciate you connecting with us here on, SAFM and Channel Africa in the countdown to G20.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Doctor. That's Dr. Okito Owedi. Always a pleasure, Ashraf Garda. Looking forward to our conversation again next week when we
Thank you
focus
so much for
on
having
more
me. This was
G20
lovely.
issues. Thank you, Doctor. You have a great one. And that's how we come to the end of our G20 feature for today. I mean, one thing about Ashraf is that closing this gender employment and pay gaps could boost GDP records, say, by around 5 to 6% in developed and emerging markets. And then in other emerging markets, it goes as high as 10 to 13%. So these conversations being so critical, not just for women, but for global economic stability and progress as well.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability. Are you fluent in French, Chinyanja, Portuguese, and Kiswahili? Are you passionate about radio? And are you looking to work in South Africa? Do you have papers that qualify you to work in South Africa? In that case, we might have an opportunity for you to work for Channel Africa. Send us your CV and demo at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Remember, if you don't hear from us within 14 days, it means you have not made it or you have not been selected. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
From markets to innovation. From markets to innovation. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni covers it all. With Africa's future in focus. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 29 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. And let's head over now to the markets desk where we can take a look at the latest market indicators this hour. And standing by is Channel Africa's Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Thank you, Thami. These are your financial indicators. $1 is trading at 17.32 in South Africa, Botswana 13.26, Namibia 17, Namibian dollars 31, Zambia 22 kwacha 52. In Kenya, the dollar is 128 shilling 4, Ethiopia 146 bih, 852, Uganda 3,000 shilling 432, Tanzania 2,000 shilling 451. $1 in Nigeria is 1,460 naira. In Egypt, the dollar is 47 Egyptian pound 61. Tunisia, 2 dinar 92. Algeria, 129 dinar 38. Morocco, 90 ram 7. In Angola, the dollar is 912 kwanza. The Congolese franc is 2,330 to the US dollar. Looking at commodities, gold is at $4,255, platinum at $1,692 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil at $62.29 a barrel. That is all from me. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And for the latest from the business of sport, here is Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Thank you so much, Thami. A very good afternoon from the Sports Day. So soccer's global governing body, FIFA, has opened a media rights tender covering the next 2 men's FIFA World Cups across 9 European markets. Now, rights covering the 2026, the one in the USA, Canada, as well as Mexico, in 2030 in Spain, Portugal, as well as Morocco tournaments went out on tender yesterday across Armenia, Azerbaijan, Estonia, Georgia, Iceland, Latvia, Lithuania, Malta, as well as the Ukraine. The 2026 event will involve a record 48 teams, including 16 from Europe, taking part in 104 matches. Now, for the 2030 World Cup, while Spain, Portugal, as well as Morocco will host the vast majority of the games, Argentina, Uruguay, as well as Paraguay will host one each to mark 100 years since the inaugural World Cup in Uruguay. Out of the countries covered by this tender, none managed to qualify for the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, or the 2018 World Cup in Russia. So in terms of broadcast deals for those territories covering the 2022 tournament, all were covered through a significant tie-up, which was covering 37 territories in total between FIFA as well as European Broadcasting Union, the EBU umbrella organization for free-to-air broadcasters. Now, this meant that for most part of it, the Qatar tournament was shown by the main public broadcasters across 9 countries. Now, the previous tender covering FIFA World Cup broadcast rights went live in Hong Kong in mid-January of this year. That process covers the rights for the 2026 tournament as well as the 2027 Women's World Cup to be played in Brazil. Back home now, South Africa's Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture, Gayton McKenzie, has made a promise to reward the World Cup-bound Bafana Bafana stars as well as the technical team with bonuses estimated at $288,000 US. McKenzie made this announcement in the dressing room during the players, after the players defeated Rwanda in a World Cup qualifier on Tuesday, beating the Rwandanese side 3-0 to finish top of Group C. Bafana Bafana are returning to the World Cup for the first time in 16 years since South Africa last hosted the event in 2010. They last, though, qualified for this event back in 2002, and McKenzie says they will be rewarded.
What is done today, the NBC told me she's going to give you guys something. So where's she? Because she's the ATM, I'm the bank, she can't give more than me. I'm going to meet them tonight. So I already spoke to the boss here to say, I'm going to give something, but it must be shared equally amongst all of you.
Well, we'll stay with the Bafana Bafana. German sportswear apparel company Adidas have hinted on the social media channels that they will be taking over as the kit maker for the World Cup bound Bafana Bafana. So Bafana Bafana booked their spot in North America on Tuesday night with an emphatic 3-0 victory over Rwanda. And the South African Football Association subsequently announced a day next that their relationship with French sportswear brand La Coque Sportive will be coming to an end in December of this year. So posting images of various players like Talent Mbata as well as Ronan Williams, who wear Adidas boots, on their social media channels, the Germany company had the words of "Count us in" on the photos. Now, the post led many to now believe that Bafana Bafana, who famously kitted out by Adidas during their last World Cup appearance in 2010, will once again be wearing jerseys made of the company at next year's edition. And finally, Netflix, long known for its scripted series as well as movies, has been entering live sports streaming over the past year. Its entry became modest, but has now scaled rapidly, focusing on major live broadcast, documentaries as well as high-profile exhibitions. Now, the streaming giant began with an exclusive 3-year streaming deal to select NFL games starting in 2024. It also secured a 10-year exclusive global rights with WWE flagship's weekly wrestling show, including event streaming like NXT as well as SmackDown. By March of 2025, they had an exclusive stream of the 2026 MLB season opener as part of a 3-year deal with over $200 million US. Now, Netflix sports experiments drove large short-term sign-ups as well as viewer spikes, proved that live sport can attract users as well as younger audiences. But what would Netflix sports streaming landscape look like in a region of Africa? So in Africa alone, sport, especially football, is culturally central, and it's a powerful hook to bringing different countries as well as regions together. In recent times, sports content has become one of the fastest growing sectors in a creator space, and football accounts for about 70% of sports viewership on the African continent. And that's a wrap from the Sports Desk this afternoon on Channel Africa. It is 16:36 p.m. Central African Time. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or call us on +27 11714 4459. There'll be more sporting updates tomorrow morning on Africa Rise and Shine. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports. Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa means business.
Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 4:37 Central African time as we continue our focus on the leading business stories on the African continent. We turn our focus now to Malawi, where the President Peter Mutharika has asked his Zambian counterpart Hakainde Hichilema for 200,000 metric tons of maize to fill a food deficit during the lean period. Hichilema confirmed this when he opened the 2025 Southern Province Investment and Trade Exposition this week, saying his country has surplus maize. Mutharika's spokesperson Shadrack Namalombo confirmed that the president talked to his Zambian counterpart over the phone. Social campaigner Jan Kasunda has since welcomed the move, saying many Malawans need urgent food aid. George Mhanga, our reporter from Blantyre, reports in Malawi.
Malawi's decision to ask Zambia for maize comes in the wake of a report done by the Malawi Vulnerability Assessment Committee, MVAC, which established that more than 4 million people need food assistance. This week, Minister of Finance, Economic Planning and Development, Joseph Mwanaveka, also said government estimates that the country needs an additional 200,000 metric tons of maize. He said the affected people will not be able to meet their annual food requirement between this month and March next year, representing 22% of the national population. Social campaigner Jan Kasunda has backed government's decision to import maize. He, however, said the 200,000 metric tons may not be enough, as such government should continue negotiating with local farmers on prices so that the grain can be bought locally in the near future.
The government's decision to buy maize from Zambia is correct because it is meant to serve the 4 million Malawians that are feared to face hunger in the coming months. However, what I don't agree with is the decision to buy the maize from elsewhere. First of all, we have farmers that worked really hard in their fields to produce maize. We need to empower our farmers. The government should have first prioritized to buy the maize from local farmers. This would in a great way support our farmers, give them the urge to continue doing their farming business.
Last month, the government-owned Agricultural Development and Marketing Corporation, ADMAC, also announced plans to import 200,000 metric tons of maize to ensure consistent availability of the commodity during the lean season. ADMAC's spokesperson Teresa Chapulapula said the decision to import was reached after a careful assessment of stock levels, market trends, flow of maize on the market and depots from local suppliers, and the projected impact on household food security.
At ADMAC Limited, we import 200,000 metric tons of maize into the country, while we are still purchasing maize from the local market. Our ongoing assessment, based on current stock levels, market trends, the flow of maize from local suppliers to our depots and markets, and the projected impact on household food security, has shown the need for imports.
About 6 million people faced hunger in the 2024 to 2025 updated assessment, while 4 million people were hungry in the 2023 to 2024 consumption year. However, this year's figure is higher than that of the 2022 to 2023 and 2021 to 2022 consumption years, when 3 million people and 1 million people were hungry respectively. Blantyre-based resident Thomas Banda is happy that government has zeroed in.
This is the good development because this signals the end or the reduction of food shortage situation in Malawi, because as you understand, here in Malawi we are currently facing food shortages because of some climatic change and also flooding and also El Nino, which hit the country over the past few years. So now, in addition to the food shortage situation, the maize which is available on the market has increased, so that most of us, we can't afford to buy. The prices are high at unaffordable prices, which we cannot able to buy. So I wish this maize could have arrived in the country sooner than later, because otherwise we will die of hunger.
In June this year, the World Food Programme projected Malawi's maize deficit at 1.2 million metric tons, or 33% of harvest. The national annual requirement is 3.7 million metric tons. Malawi had projected a maize deficit of 537,380 metric tons in the 2024 to 2025 growing season, with Parliament approving 98.5 billion in the 2025 to 2026 national budget. George Muhango, Channel Africa News, Blantyre.
Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Channel Africa is live at the 14th Oppenheimer Research Conference, a leading platform for natural and environmental science. Convened by Oppenheimer Generations Research and Conservation, it brings together top scientists, policymakers, as well as conservationists looking to advance solutions to global environmental crises in an ever-changing world. Channel Africa will be interviewing some of the leading African voices who are shaping meaningful approaches to some of Africa's most pressing challenges. Do stay tuned.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
South Africa's Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, Dr. Deon George, has officially opened the third and final G20 Environment and Climate Sustainability Ministerial Meeting in Cape Town, South Africa. The meeting brings together global leaders as well as experts to discuss practical measures to protect the planet and drive collective action on climate resilience, biodiversity conservation and environmental sustainability. Channel Africa's Lebogang Mabange reports.
Excellencies, colleagues and esteemed delegates, it is my great honour to declare the G20 Environment and Climate Sustainability Ministerial Meeting officially open. I thank you.
On the opening day of the G20 Environment and Climate Sustainability Working Group meeting, South Africa emphasized the need for stronger global cooperation to tackle the world's most urgent environmental challenges. Dr. Deon George is the Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment.
We meet at a defining moment in the global effort to confront the mounting pressures on our planet's natural systems, from environmental degradation and biodiversity loss to pollution. These interconnected forces threaten not only ecosystems, but also livelihoods, stability, and human well-being. The urgency for decisive and united action has never been greater. It demands that we strengthen multilateral cooperation, scale up innovation, and move from commitment to implementation.
Dr. George added that under South Africa's G20 presidency, the focus will be on deepening cooperation through evidence-based approaches to conserve biodiversity, enhance air quality, and promote climate resilience.
Building on the progress of Brazil's and India's G20 presidencies, South Africa sought to deepen cooperation through practical evidence-based approaches and strengthen biodiversity conservation, enhance air quality, and promote climate resilience. South Africa assumed the G20 presidency at a time when the world stands at a crossroads between crisis and opportunity. We are living in a decade defined by transformation, where the convergence of technology, trade, and transition is reshaping economies and expectations.
The Premier of the Western Cape Province, Alan Wind, also raised concerns over declining global commitment to climate goals and increasing military expenditure.
I personally, as the Premier of this region, am really worried about what's happening globally. I look at how the world is seemingly not committed to our 2050 commitments. We seem to be reversing on so many of those commitments. I look at how the increase in spending, specifically in military spending, moving from the last 10 years, a 37% growth to now $2.7 trillion in 2024 on military spending. But at the same time, I see spending on climate change mitigation reducing.
Meanwhile, the province's member of the Executive Council for Local Government, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, Anton Bredel, highlighted the Western Cape's ongoing efforts to achieve a climate-resilient future.
Over the last decade, the Western Cape has worked steadily to institutionalize climate change responses in our government. Our climate change response strategy laid the foundation, and we are already halfway through the initial implementation phase of our Vision 2050 strategy. Our goal is clear: a climate-resilient Western Cape by 2050, a net zero emission trajectory with meaningful implementation achieved by 2030.
The meeting will run until Friday, October 17th, where G20 ministers are expected to finalize the Cape Town Declaration, a roadmap aimed at advancing joint solutions for climate and environmental sustainability. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Cape Town, South Africa.
Je, una jambo lolote akilini mwako? Je, una shauku kuhusu masuala muhimu? Na je, una maoni ambayo unataka yasikike? Kweli, hili jukwaa ni la kwako. Piga simu au tuandikie kwenda WhatsApp namba alama ya kujumulisha 2760552594 na tutakupigia simu.
Mtangazaji wa habari zetu za Afrika Kusini mjini Johannesburg.
Hivyo unaweza kuwa mshirika kwenye matangazo yetu. Sio mazungumzo tu, ni fursa yako ya kuchangia maoni yako na kushirikiana na jumuiya ya wasikilizaji wanaotamani mtazamo wako. Tufuate kwenye mitandao ya kijamii. Tembelea tovuti yetu www.channelafrica.co.za na uwe tayari kushiriki na kuchangia maoni yako kwenye Channel Africa. Channel Africa, mtazamo wa Kiafrika.
African enterprise meets global opportunity. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
It is exactly 4:49 Central African Time. The surge in global public debt is driven by G20 countries. This is according to the International Monetary Fund. Global public debt levels are expected to rise above 100% by the year 2029. This is the highest level since 1948. This while emerging economies on the continent will remain burdened by the high cost of debt, an issue the African bloc hopes to have addressed at the G20 Head of States meeting taking place in Johannesburg, South Africa in November. Dimakatso Leshuru has the details.
G20 countries are racking up debt and fast, pointing to deteriorating fiscal risks. These countries collectively account for around 85% of global GDP and represent 75% of global trade, but they are living beyond their means with debt levels fast reaching record highs. Vitor Gaspar, a director at the IMF's Fiscal Affairs Department, says countries need to rein in borrowings and rather spend existing budgets smarter.
In such scenario, public debt would be at its highest level since 1948. Moreover, the distribution of risks is tilted towards debt accumulating even faster. With a 5% risk, debt would reach 124% in 2029. The world public debt landscape is very diverse. Countries differ widely in their deficit and debt levels. Many major economies have public debt greater or projected to grow over 100% of GDP.
Leading economies like Canada, China, France, the UK, Italy, and the US, with typically deep and liquid sovereign bond markets, face moderate fiscal risks when compared with emerging economies like those on the African continent.
Many emerging markets and low-income countries face tougher fiscal challenges despite their debt often below 60% of GDP. Their policy options and funding access are limited. As the map shows, 55 countries are assessed at high, pink, or distress level, red, of fiscal risk. In many cases, relatively low debt to GDP ratios are accompanied by low debt tolerance. Beyond the present, fiscal risks loom large. Public debt dynamics have drastically changed in recent years. It's not only the size of debt, but also the cost. from the global financial crisis through to the COVID period.
He points out that this, coupled with stretched financial asset valuations, could lead to a market correction with adverse consequences.
The situation is now starkly different. Interest rate increases have raised funding costs and strained budget. Indeed, interest spending is estimated to increase to 2.9% of GDP in 2025 from 2% in 2020 and is projected to continue to rise to the end of the decade.
On the African continent, the high cost of debt means governments are paying more just to service their debt, leaving less room for the things that boost growth like infrastructure, schools and healthcare. The IMF has made recommendations for economies like Nigeria, saying a neutral fiscal stance was more appropriate. Division Chief for Fiscal Affairs at the IMF, David De Ficciuri, elaborates.
We think that this neutral fiscal stance is also consistent in helping monetary policies to reduce inflation. But let me tell you more about the structural characteristics in terms of our recommendation for countries as Nigeria. And our policies advice has been both on the revenue side as well on the spending side. I think on the revenue side there is a scope to improve revenue. On the spending side there is a scope to, on the one hand, improve the efficiency of the spending, this is something that as well the compositions, but also to increase social spending to address social vulnerability in the country.
Meanwhile, Egypt also received a nod for improvements in its public finances. However, the debt service costs remain a heavy burden. IMF era Dabla Norris explains.
Egypt achieved a primary surplus of about 2.5% of GDP in fiscal year 2024-2025. So overall debt we see has declined from about 96% to 86% of GDP over the year, and further reductions are expected by the end of the projection horizon. But I should add that the debt service burden in Egypt remains pretty heavy. Interest payments alone absorb about 3/4 of revenue, so that limits the fiscal space that is available.
As South Africa prepares to host the African G20, a total of 165 organizations have criticized the country for failing to make progress on debt sustainability issues during its presidency of the G20. Even though these issues have been standing for years, until now, emerging economies have not been able to have their voices heard on these multilateral platforms. These organizations have urged South Africa to push for reforms before it hands over the G20 presidency to the US on December 1st. For Channel Africa News, I'm Dimakato Leshoro in Johannesburg.
9 to 12 midday Central African Time. On the move with Palisa Tau and Benjamin Mushatami.
Should influencers be expected to be impactful in society? If there is a social or societal conversation that goes up, should we be waiting eagerly to hear what the influencers have to say?
They are more than just entertainers. They are thought leaders to some certain degree. They influence culture. They influence people's thought processes. They set trends. They shape opinions of people. And the sad reality is, although a lot of them don't want to accept it, I think we're getting better with them realizing that embarking in that journey and in that space comes with a certain level of responsibility.
I see it differently in that, professionals are really good at their job, but there is an optionality that they might have to use the position that they hold in society to be able to deliver a message. This year you made the example of actors and actresses. So the same could apply to a sportsman. Just because someone's good at soccer doesn't mean that they have to have an influence over society from a specific standpoint.
Keeping you on the know and on the move. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
It is exactly 4:56 Central African Time as we wrap it up for this Thursday edition. A quick summary of what we had in store for you today. Zambia and Malawi reaching an agreement as far as the supply of maize to the country. The president talked to his Zambian counterpart, that is Mutharika spokesperson Shadrack Namalomba, confirmed that the president spoke to his Zambian counterpart over the phone, and they have agreed that there is going to be an exchange of maize in order to make sure that the shortages that are being experienced in Malawi are not going to adversely affect the population there. Zambia coming in to assist. Also, our G20 feature with Ashraf Garda and SFM today, really interesting, where we're looking at women's economy and the contributions that are being made by the W20 to the G20 conversations. A very important conversation there with Dr. Okito Weda of Creative Development, talking about the fact that this conversation needs to move from women's issues to the economic track. Standing by to take you through for the rest of the afternoon, at least for the next bit. A very good afternoon to you, Joël, as you get ready for Vue d'Afrique.
Bonjour Thami, merci. Bonjour à tous les auditeurs de Channel Africa. Sur Vue d'Afrique, tout à l'heure, nous parlerons de la nouvelle configuration de l'espace politique au Gabon. Le parti du président Brice Oligui Nguema remporte 120 des 145 sièges du Parlement. Et nous parlerons de la nouvelle plateforme lancée en RDC, Sauvons la RDC, lancée et dirigée par Joseph Kabila. Et aussi au Burkina Faso, 3 journalistes interpellés depuis lundi, libérés mercredi. C'est tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique. Merci de rester connecté. Merci Thami.
Merci beaucoup. And as she says, do indeed rest connected to Vue d'Afrique, which begins right now. From myself, Thami Ngubeni, and the entire team here at Africa in Business, Onele Nzinzi, Chanduko Ligege, Musibudi Makura, Mabubuloka, Tando Lutuli, and Talent Butelezi. You have yourself a splendid evening further.